Good afternoon, everyone. Don't everybody talk at once.
Good afternoon.
Just give another minute and we'll get started. Thanks for everybody being prompt today. Appreciate it.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, everybody. Well, I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So thanks for joining us today. My name is Brian Mulligan. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here with Catalyst Group. Appreciate your time and attention today. And what we're here to talk about today is everybody's fun topic, telecom audits. So talk a little bit about some different strategies for maintaining budget clarity and cost control. And I did think I might have picked a bad timing for this, being that we're in tax season and talking about audits. But I think we'll get through it today. So thanks again, and Jen, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So on the call today, I have two esteemed presenters, Eric Hackinson, who is the Director of Technology from Wilton Public Schools, and Greg Friedline, who is the Deputy Chief Information Officer from University of Hartford. And towards the tail end of this presentation, they're going to talk a little bit about their audit experiences, what they've seen, why it was important to them. But thought it was a good opportunity for you guys to hear right from a customer. So go ahead, Jen. You can hit the next slide, please. So wanted to run through the agenda today. I'm going to talk very briefly about who Catalyst Group is for those of you that don't know. We'll talk about some customer challenges, and that relates to billing and telecom and services and all the things that go along with that. We'll talk some about the impact of telecom audits. So what's the WIFM? What's in it for me, right? So what's in it for you and your organization? We'll talk through our unique audit process and how we conduct audits. And then we'll share some case studies and success stories. And we definitely want to leave some time for questions and answers at the end. I want to make this as interactive as possible. So if during the presentation, if you feel like you have a need to jump in and you have a burning question, feel free to stop me and fire away. So, but that's kind of where we're headed. So go ahead, Jen. Next slide. So Catalyst Group, we are a full service IT consulting organization. Our experience spans over 30 years. For those of you who haven't heard the story before, I sold payphones back in the day. So I started working for SNET back in 95. And so I've been around for a long time, as has all of the members of Catalyst Group been in the telecom IT space. Our main function is to make service and the telecom and IT world simpler for our customers. So at the end of the day, we know you have a million jobs on your plate. Our goal is to provide consistent education, proactive service, and give you white glove treatment through the process, because we know how difficult it can be to work with the carriers and billing and services and questions and concerns and not knowing where to go. And that's really where we thrive. We work with over 100 plus technology partners for a variety of services, anything down to the POTS line all the way up to SD-WAN and Azure and all of the fun cloud stuff that's coming about. Our customer satisfaction rating is 97%. And the reason for that is, and the reason why we started Catalyst Group, back in 2021, was simply to be closer to the customer, understand your needs, and help improve your experience. So what have we learned over the years? We've learned that most IT leaders have this wide, vast range of ongoing telecom and mobility challenges. And in no order, but one of the biggest ones is confusing bills. Sometimes I say it's done by intent, but telecom bills are very confusing. Contracts have gotten so much more complicated over the years. Greg, I think you'd agree. Contracts have gotten so complicated and convoluted that you feel like you sign up for one thing and then it's another, and then you get the bill and it's another. So The goal of all of this is really to just simplify for you guys. Many times you have limited visibility into what services you have and what you're paying and how it's rated and how it matches up with the contract. And then it leads to billing discrepancies that you might fight for months or even years, depending on the complexity of your arrangements with the carriers. Working with multiple carriers. So I know most everybody on this call works with a variety of carriers. So who do you call for what, when, what number do I call? Do I have a rep? How do I talk to billing? How do I talk to service? So that is one of the more complex arrangements, is working with a diverse group of carriers. What do I actually have? What's my inventory of services? How am I keeping track of that? Big challenge for people because, as we know, staffs have decreased, but the workload has monumentally increased. So that leads into limited resources. Who's actually going to do the work, and do I even have anybody who can do the work to look at any of these things? And what's at the end of the day, it's about support. So what is my level of support that I'm getting from my carriers, my partners, my internal and external teams? How do I get the support I need? So these are some of the wide-ranging customer challenges we see on a day-to-day basis, and we hear from our customers, that we hope that through this audit discussion, you'll have a better understanding of what's accomplishable, what you can do, and how you get there. So the areas that most often triggered the need for an audit, voice lines. So what do we know about voice lines? So if you've transitioned over to VoIP, if you've downsized, if you've increased the number of people you have, typically there are a whole host of unused local phone lines or legacy voice services that are still being billed. When people transition to voice over IP, obviously that decreases the need for your traditional copper POTS lines. What we find is all good intentions. So we're going to transition to VoIP. We're going to save a bunch of money. We're no longer paying $100 for a POTS line anymore. We're paying, $20 a seat. However, somebody actually has to go back and re-audit and disconnect all of those lines as you transition out of that service. And a lot of times that's what we find is there's no resource, there's no inventory, there's no knowledge of what was actually in place. So how can you do that? And how do you find the time to do it? Similarly, data and IP services. So if most of us have transitioned from one provider to another for internet services, whether you've moved to a data center, whether you've increased your bandwidth and you have multiple circuits for diversity. A lot of times when you migrate to the new circuit, that old circuit will sit in place, and typically it's a 30-day window if you issue the disconnect properly. And I say that issue the disconnect properly because we know with most providers, you have to send in those disconnect requests 3 and 4 times to get it actually done right, to make sure that it actually happens. And then do you go back and relook at the bill? Have you unplugged the device from your network from a security standpoint? Right. So there's a whole bunch of piece parts that have to get done through the process that sometimes fall by the wayside. I know most people cannot stand managing mobility and wireless. We were speaking to a customer the other day who said, I don't think I've ever disconnected a mobile device. Just as somebody new comes in, we just buy a new device because it's easy. And that's where a big portion of overflow comes in from the costing side. So who's actually looking at the wireless bills? AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, they're all very good at saying the unlimited plan is the best plan for all staff members because you get everything you always need for a fixed rate per month. And in concept, that is a true statement. So it's not a lie. It is a true statement. However, when you actually dig into the utilization of each individual person, and again, it's a timing thing. When you actually dig into the utilization and the plans, a lot of times just by making some simple changes to your account, maybe moving some people from an unlimited plan to a shared plan who don't use the devices as often, you can recognize some real cost savings on that side. And again, it's as people have aged out of your organization, have you disconnected those lines? Are you still paying for devices that you don't need? What is the upgrade path? And again, who's managing it? So these are the typical 3 areas that when we're talking to customers about an audit that seem to come up 99.9% of the time. So there used to be a show called, Behind the Music. This is Behind the Charges. Bills are intentionally vague and unclear. A lot of times the service is not even listed on the bill. It could just be a line item that says internet services or voice services with a big number at the end of it. All well and good for the accounts payable people who take the bill and they look at the bill and they go, okay, it looks about the same as I paid last month, so there's no changes. So I'm gonna write the check, right? And it happens every day, all day. If it happens to you, I promise you, you are not alone. Where the rubber really meets the road is in the customer service records. So at the end of the day, most customers don't know that they can request a customer service record to get the actual listing of services by location, what it is, how much they're paying for that, what the taxes are, by line item. And that's really what we work off of when we conduct the audit, is because we're so familiar with these customer service records. The bill is great to get just as like kind of a level set. Hey, customer ABC is spending $5,000 a month on phone lines, but they've moved over to voice over IP. We know there's a problem there. So we will typically say, hey, we're going to request a letter of authorization. We're going to get the customer service records and we're going to detail out for you what exactly you have and where, and then make recommendations from there. But that's the difference between the bill, which is typically just a summary, and the customer service records. And a lot of companies, your larger telecom companies, provide a summary bill, and you actually have to log on to a portal. So with AT&T, it's Business Direct or whatever that portal is that you have to log on to if you are authorized, if you can get the access, if you can remember who originally set it up. And again, I feel like it's cumbersome for customers to have to try to get that information and figure it out on their own. So what's in it for me? What is the actual impact of a telecom audit? So eliminate billing errors is clearly, everything I've spoken to up to this point is really talking a lot about billing errors, right? So spotting overcharges, looking for discrepancies, retiring unused services. So identify and recognizing what's no longer in use. Ensure contract compliance, and that's a big one. Most carriers have a clause in their contract that allows them to raise the rate either, X% every year, or in some carriers' cases, it's I can raise the rate to whatever I feel like whenever I feel like it. So it's important to understand those complexities of the agreement, but also be able to line up the contract terms and what you originally signed for with where the bill is. And sometimes it's as simple as, hey, carrier ABC has the ability to raise my rate 10% every year. Have they done that? Did they do it? Where is it? And does it actually line up with the 10%? Gaining inventory clarity, knowing exactly what you're paying for. And I talked a little bit about that before, but that is really an important piece to managing your entire telecom and IT fleet. So whether it's mobility, whether it's landline, whether it's internet, whether it's devices, PCs, you should maintain you have to get to a point where you have a clear starting point. And then you also have to identify whether it's internally or externally through a partner or a vendor, who's going to continue to maintain that inventory going forward. Is it done quarterly? Is it done monthly? Is it done annually? It's something that's really important that gets done as you come out of the audit process. And the last part of the last impact piece is really optimizing costs. So freeing up budget without switching providers or potentially switching providers. So when we conduct an audit, we may find that you're using ABC service and you can transition to this other service and save yourself 35% a month by making some small changes. Now, understanding that there are contract challenges and term challenges and all of those things that go along with making changes and approvals and all of that. But a lot of times what we find is the juice is worth the squeeze by doing it. So it makes a lot of sense to forklift out of an old legacy service to a newer technology or a similar technology for a decreased spend. So at the end of the audit, what the goal is, or what I think everyone's goal is, to find unexpected savings that you didn't know that were there, not necessarily say, hey, I'm just going to take that money and raise a flag and say, look at how much money I saved. It's reallocating those dollars to projects that you didn't get in the budget last year, or that that server upgrade you needed to do, or this PC upgrade I needed to do. Now I have X dollars towards that project. So it's all about taking that money and reusing it inside of the IT space to help to make your environment better. So I'll talk a little bit about our audit process and kind of how we go through our process. Really, to me, if you don't set an objective up front, it is bound to fail. So Eric and Greg will probably attest to this, that I spoke ad nauseum early on when we first started having these discussions around the audit. Was I need to make sure that we are clear on what we are going to look at, why we're looking at it, and make sure it lines up with what your goals are. So it's not just about what Catalyst Group's goals are from an audit standpoint. It's also, what are the goals? What are you looking for to come out of the audit? Because really, at the end of the day, it's all about you, the customer. There is always a team. So there's a team internally here at Catalyst that works on these audits, but there's also a team on your end that's going to be required to gather information. And not only gather information, but be able to weigh in on the decision of doing an audit. So there's costs associated with doing an audit. There's change associated with doing an audit. There may be approvals to make changes that are required from doing the audit. So typically we're involved with IT, finance, procurement, and typically upper level management and leadership to make sure that we are laying out a clear message across the organization as to why we're doing this. One thing I do want to touch on here that I think is important is, when you do an audit, sometimes there's a lot of money found in savings. And people get a little skittish and say, well, oh my God, how am I going to say that we've been overpaying by X dollars a year for these services that we didn't know about? And that becomes a very sticky situation a lot of times. Our goal at the end of the day is to buffer that for all of you, to be able to have those conversations early on to say, you're thin staffed in these departments. You wouldn't know just by looking at a general bill, and the carriers have made it more difficult to understand what's actually happening. That's why you're in the position you're in. It's no fault of one individual. So it's important to understand that we do provide that extra layer of support on the backside to make sure that you guys aren't taking a beating for deciding to do an audit and the results that come from it. From that point, we collect and organize the data. So we will gather all of your, in conjunction with you and your teams, we will gather all of your contracts, your invoices, service details, generate letters of authorization for you guys to sign, allowing us to grab your customer service records and give a clean and concise invoice of what services by what location you're actually billing for. Now, I've been a part of audits on both sides, so at the customer level and at the company, the audit conducting level. So a timeline is really important, because these audits can go on forever. So if I see Greg shaking his head, but if any of you have ever done large scale audits could go on for 3 years. It should never be that way. So we do our best to outline each phase of the audit and what we're doing, and assign a timeline to it and what those milestones are for us to make sure that we're staying inside of that timeline. The other piece that we over communicate a lot of times, and sometimes it becomes like a gnat and a noise, but we want to make sure that you understand that, maybe you haven't heard from us in a couple of weeks, but here are the reasons why. Right, here are the things we're running up against, but making sure that we're staying inside of those milestones, because the reality is, the goal of this audit is to recognize savings as soon as possible. And when I say recognize savings, the recognition doesn't necessarily come from me saying, hey, by doing these things, you can save this much money. It's about getting it actually applied to the bill, where you can actually see the savings and recognize the savings against your budget. So we do our best to set a realistic timeline, and depending on the size and scope, it could be 3 months or 6 months, depending on the size of the organization. Sometimes it could be a couple of weeks. So it all depends on the size and scope and complexity of each individual organization. So just want to walk you through kind of the process of conducting the audit and bringing it to completion. So the first step is obviously reviewing the contracts, validating the contracts terms, pricing, and renewals, comparing those rates to industry benchmarks. So that's where we decide whether or not we are going to bring you a alternate technology, a different service provider, what have you. If you're in, when I say this, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily overpaying. You may be paying the rate that you contracted for, and that may very well be accurate, but there may be alternatives to that spend. Identifying outdated clauses or non-compliant terms in those contracts as well. The next step is to review the invoices and customer service records. So analyzing 100% of billing for accuracy and overcharges, pinpoint duplicate charges and unnecessary services. I'm sure everybody can attest to duplicate charges on bills. It happens about once or twice a year, where somehow the line item A becomes 3. So it does happen. And again, ensuring contract compliance and cost transparency. So you know exactly what you're paying for when. Building an inventory, so matching all services to the carrier records and physical locations. So that's one of the things that has traditionally been a challenge, is having that inventory that shows this service is associated to this location at this address. And that, for whatever reason, seems to be a real challenge for the client to obtain from the provider. And a lot of times, I'll just use Frontier as an example. They were SNET, SBC, AT&T, and now Frontier. Through 4 levels of acquisition and merger, those records have dissipated over the years. So it's very hard to hold the organization to a standard to maintain those records. Sometimes you just have to do it yourself. Again, through that inventory, we're going to uncover hidden and misbilled or unused services and highlight those optimization opportunities. And then the last piece of this is to check for savings. So identify and validate every cost savings opportunity and present that to you and your teams. Present those recommendations for approval. And then the next step that we take is we submit those requests directly to the providers on your behalf. So what we don't want to have happen is we show you all of these good things and say, hey guys, have at it, good luck. We will take that on your behalf, submitting it to the providers, getting order numbers, due dates, tracking and confirming that the savings and any credits that are due are applied post-implementation. So when I say that, what we deliver back to you is, here was your bill when we started. Here was your bill when we completed the audit showing the reductions. That way you have a validation point when you're talking to your leadership and your teams to validate the savings. Go ahead, Jen. So what to expect at the end of an audit? I say what you can expect. I say whether you choose Catalyst Group or you choose another provider to do an audit, this really should be a what should you expect to receive at the end of an audit. So a clear, organized inventory of all of your services, a clear list of actionable recommendations. So renegotiations, implementing new services, disconnecting unused services, and having an advocate to go at the provider for any credits that are due for services that should have been disconnected. Continued value. It's really important to regularly review your services. I always encourage you to do it with a partner, because that's the world we live in. But if you don't choose a partner to do it internally, just to make sure that your costs stay optimized over time, because it's very easy for it to quickly spiral out of control. I've seen many organizations who do an audit and they walk away from the audit and they say, thank you so much for everything that you did. And we talk to them 2 years later, and they're like, wow, our bills have really dramatically gone up. I think we're going to have to do another audit. We're going to have to do another audit. So it's really, it becomes much more manageable when you shrink that time gap in between doing those reviews. If you can do it every 6 months, just at a cursory level, to make sure that the costs haven't spiraled out of control, or that there's not a whole bunch of new stuff that's been added to your bill, it's really important for your organization to maintain cost control and transparency. Just wanted to provide a quick sample inventory report of what we deliver back to you. So in this case, we were looking at some phone lines and some internet services. So what we try to provide is as much detail as possible. So obviously what the phone number or account number is, what the billing number is, what the actual service is, where it's located. On phone lines, we will call each individual phone line to see what we get from a result on the other end. So in some cases, we will call a customer we did inventory. I literally called 15 phone numbers that said the number was out of service, and they'd been being billed for these phone lines forever. So obviously, we know if a phone line's out of service, it typically can go away. Sometimes we get a fax tone. Sometimes we get an alarm tone. Sometimes we get nothing, ring no answer, and we have to come back and say, okay, we received a ring no answer on this phone line. Could that be an elevator or an alarm line? Are you still using phone lines in your alarm panel? Have you considered going to GSM for your fire and burg panels because it is in code now to get rid of that high cost phone line? So those are the types of recommendations that we'll come back to you with. So you can see in the notes column, we just, we give a short description of what we recommend. And if you were to make those changes, what the monthly and annualized savings would be for making those changes. Same thing with data circuits. We will actually pull the service and your circuit ID. So you can validate the circuit ID in your, if you're using Meraki or FortiGate to validate if that circuit's still even working. We've had to send out the provider to do a tag and locate because customers have said, God, I don't even know that circuit still exists anymore. Do you know where it is? So we've actually sent the provider out to do a tag and locate and found out that, hey, that circuit should have been disconnected. And obviously make the recommendation against those circuits as well. On the mobility side, it's a little bit different because those bills are a little more, I'll call it robust in the way they're presented. So it's a different type of format that you would get from a mobility audit. Go ahead, Jen. So I'll talk first about Wilton Public Schools. So Eric and I met back in Q3 last year and started talking about the district and what they were faced with from a budget concern and trying to find money to do other projects. And we entered into an audit scenario with Wilton, basically to really just look at their telecom bills and say what's what. So at the end of the day, the business outcome from this audit, we uncovered a bunch of redundant services, annualized savings of about $44,000 by eliminating those services. But Eric, I'm just going to ask you. So when we first started talking, you didn't even know you wanted an audit, if I remember correctly. you weren't even really sure. But tell me about where your mindset got to after we had a conversation and why you decided to move forward with the audit for the district.
No, we had been working with the town on some shared services, and the town had been managing our telecom services. And one of the pieces that we really didn't have was good oversight over all of our systems. So initially, when we talked about doing an audit, we sort of were not in a position where we had access to a lot of the records. A little while into the conversation, there were some changes over at the town, and we were able to get a hold of our records and get them to you. And we were able to find that we had a significant number of copper lines that were still active after we had gone to an IP-based phone system. So once we began the process, it took a little while to get you access to all the different accounts because I think we had 27 different phone accounts for
yes, you did.
Facilities. We had a lot of different random accounts we were paying for. And where we are today is we have the $44,000 in savings, but we're now down to 5 bills, one for each of our buildings, which makes our management so much more streamlined. And it's much simpler to understand. We're now doing our mobile audit with you as well, and continuing on that process because we definitely have a number of, and we're also working on the EFAX project as well. So each of them are additional savings, which will probably drive our savings into the mid 50s, which is very helpful for us. But we also don't want to be spending money on things we don't need.
Very well said, Eric. Thank you. Could you just talk briefly about your experience with us through the audit process? Maybe just talk a little bit about what you got. Did what you receive outside of the savings from a detail standpoint, did that meet kind of what your expectations were?
Well, I have to say, I've gone through audits in previous districts, and they have not been as smooth. So, what we found is once we were able to get you the data and sign over the documentation to allow you to talk to the carriers, it was very hands off for us. We came back, we talked, we provided additional information if you need it. You went back. And then once we actually made the cuts to our systems, one of the fantastic things, which isn't advertised in the service, is we inadvertently disconnected a couple of elevator and phone lines that we actually needed to keep, and that was on us. We went through and we were sure that we did not need those lines. Well, we did, and when we let you know we needed them back, you were able to get them back for us, which was fabulous. So we're very appreciative of that. But it was a very hands-off process for us. We were able to say, okay, you said we need this. We were able to hand off that data and information to you. If you needed something additional, you came back, but it was very hands-off for us and allowed us to continue doing what we needed to do. And you were able to take care of procuring the cuts and making the recommendations on what we could eliminate.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
And Jen, you can go ahead and flip to the next slide. So with University of Hartford, very, very similar scenario. So, obviously limited visibility. So we went the other way with the University of Hartford. We started with the mobility audit, which is not necessarily common, but it's okay. So again, limited staff, limited visibility. We were able to pull together the mobility, and then we parlayed it into looking at voice and data circuits as well. It was I would say this was a very collaborative audit. So Greg and I have gotten to know each other very well over the last 6 to 7 months in many ways, but it really became collaborative in like, what services do I need? Why do I have to maintain them? So there was a lot of two-way dialogue around not just making cuts to lines, but how do I reallocate? How do I better identify? How do I better improve my technology? So on the mobility side of things, there was roughly a $7,000 annual savings just by making some of those changes to the mobile plans that we talked about. And we continue to do that with the University of Hartford on a month-to-month basis now and the main reason for that is just having the extra set of hands to look at all of that it seems to be very helpful. And then on the telecom side, we uncovered out of the gate about $6,000 in annual savings, and we've made recommendations for roughly $30,000 in future savings, which we're still working through. But Greg, maybe you could talk a little bit about the mobility side, because that's really how this all started, and maybe talk a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to discuss it. So, we ended up in a situation where, for reasons lost to the past, mobility was being managed by our procurement department. And so that got moved to information technology, which made sense. We were already managing other connectivities. And so, when Catalyst came in, we're sitting here looking at this big pile of bills and basically saying, we don't know what any of this is. And I think to similar points earlier in the conversation, the university was just putting everyone in one style of account, unlimited, and just charging this flat bill. And so we had this really great experience of going through and saying, here's a couple dozen people that aren't even using their cell phones. Do they even really need a university cell phone? Why is your license plate reader for campus police, blowing up data? All these conversations. And it was great bringing in those additional eyes and additional hands and really being able to kind of go through line item by line item that I just don't have the staff for to do that on a regular basis, and really streamline our mobile operations and again realize some cost savings there.
Thanks, Greg. I think the one thing that may be a little different with Greg and the University of Hartford too was the alternate technologies that we brought to the table as well. So there's, for those of you who are familiar, there's your traditional POTS lines, and there's a new service called POTS transformation, POTS in a box, whatever you want to call it, that will help to reduce the cost of traditional POTS lines, but also give you visibility by putting it on your network. So those types of recommendations, while not mandatory as part of the audit, right? All it is really a recommendation at the end of the day. Hey, here are some different things you can do. Greg, would you agree that if you hadn't gone through the audit, you're not hearing about these technologies on a day-to-day basis on how to better optimize your environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, University of Hartford and I think a lot of at least institutions of higher ed fall into this situation of accounting just gets the bill and says, oh, the AT&T bill is always this amount. And it's out of sight, out of mind. And yeah, I don't have the staffing to chase down emerging technologies. And so bringing in that fresh set of eyes, really looking at everything, are we doing this in the most efficient way, is what brings those solutions to the table.
Great, thank you. Jen, you go ahead and flip, please. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to open up for Q&A. Greg and Eric, thank you so much for participating today, and thank all of you for joining. I think the quote here, the power of visibility can never be underestimated. I think is really important in our world as it has changed so much and really has changed the way we do business. And I think those that are successful or are consistently improving their environment go through these audits for that reason, because they don't have the scope and scale to be plugged into each and every technology. And that's one of the things we hope to bring to your table at the end of the day is how do we help you to improve? And it's not about, it's really not about selling a widget anymore, at least not to me and not to the Catalyst Group. Our goal is to empower you with the ability to change and evolve. So I'll leave that there, and I'll open it up for any questions you guys might have. And thank you. So I do have a question. So how are the audits paid for? Great question. So we didn't talk about costing. At the end of the day, audits should never be intended for you to pay for an audit with no expectation. And really, the provider who's conducting the audit needs to have some skin in the game. So the way that we work our audits are, there's typically a very small nominal one-time charge to start the audit, and that basically covers the first part of our time. The second payment comes when you actually recognize savings. So we don't bill anything additional until you have recognized the savings on the bill and we prove that out to you. So if you all remember before I mentioned, we will show you here was the bill when we started the audit. Here's the bill when we completed the audit. Here's your savings. And we take 50% of the first year of savings. So it's a nominal amount to pay for the work to get done, but it's not an ongoing forever type of thing. It's not, you're not paying for 3 years worth of savings. You're not paying for 5 years of a contract term. It's really a finite pool of money that you're going to spend, but you're not taking money out of your pocket to pay for it. So it's not an additional budget line item. It's just reallocating some of the savings. Yes.
It's Eric. That was a big conversation with our finance group, was the payment and how we're going to pay for this. What really worked out nicely is we did the audit. We did it in our budget cycle, and the savings for the year of our budget cycle, that offset all of the costs and actually included savings for us. So it reduced our overall spend for the year and included our payment. So there was we didn't have to add anything to the line. There were no consulting fees added to the consulting line. It was all paid out of our phone and our connectivity lines. So it was for us, it was a moot point. It was very difficult, the first conversation or two, though, convincing the finance group that actually was going to happen, and it did. But we said, look, the line is $1,000, say, and we aren't going to spend more than that $1,000, and all the savings came out of that line for us, and we were able then to make the offset payment. And this upcoming year, we're going to see over $40,000 in savings on that one line. So it's a real savings that will be ongoing for us.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, the goal of these audits is not to have you add a line item to your budget. It's to really use the savings that you're finding to offset the fees. And the only other question I have is, so how quickly can you get an audit done? I will say it depends. So we've done, we did an audit for somebody who was really under the gun and pressured to get their audit done. We got an audit done in less than 10 days for not a small and non-complex environment. There are others that will typically drag on, and unfortunately, we are at the mercy of the providers. So as quickly as we can get the information, we can compile the data and provide the information to you. The challenge becomes the long pole at the end of the day is typically on the front side of you being able to compile all of your bills and information. The second long pole is getting the information from the provider. So I hate to give this answer, but it depends. But again, we do try to lay out those timelines and milestones just so you have a good understanding and can communicate that internally. Any other questions? All right. Well, I thank you all for your time very much. I appreciate your participation and your attention today, and look forward to talking to you all soon. Hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, guys.